Hi, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'm Pamela Price, your host, and this is a space and a place for real talk. This podcast is all about raw, unfiltered conversations about law, politics, culture, education, systemic racism, and everyday events shaping our world. We'll go beyond the headlines to dive deep into how some of our most pressing issues impact real people, real families, and our communities. My goal is to help you navigate the complexities of today's world. We'll break down each episode, an issue, and we'll break it down in a way that's honest, informative, and actionable. We'll hear from community leaders, lawyers, activists, educators, healers, and everyday people on the front lines of change. For those tuning in for the first time, I'm Pamela Price, a longtime attorney, political activist, and champion for justice. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel to watch the show and to my Substack to read the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome to the show. Let's talk about it. In November 2022, Ryan LaLonde became the first openly LGBTQ person elected to serve in any office in the city of Alameda when he was elected to the Alameda Unified School District's Board of Education. Ryan is an active AUSD parent, husband, father, artist, LGBTQ plus, and foster youth advocate, author, and PTA leader. Ryan has worked most of his life to create better outcomes for those in need, ranging from work in HIV/AIDS prevention in tribal communities to reducing stigma around children's mental health. Ryan also volunteers as a CASA, a court-approved special advocate for youth in foster care, and was recently appointed to the County Measure A Oversight Commission and elected as a director on the Alameda County Fair budget. Ryan has been active in local school board leadership for more than 5 years and is proud of the work the community has done to make our schools stronger, more inclusive, safe havens for our students, teachers, staff, and families. Ryan led the co-passage of the city of Alameda's Measure B in June of 2022. The bond provides more than $300 million to modernize middle schools, fully renovate Alameda's high schools, and upgrade sports and arts facilities. Ryan works full-time as an illustrator, a designer, and mixed media artist with an active studio in Alameda. Ryan's creations are a reflection of the love and passion for color, nature, and storytelling. His current works are an exploration of layering of color in acrylic and whimsical depictions of people, animals, nature, and still life. Ryan grew up on a farm, a family farm in rural Michigan, and honed his art at the University of Michigan School of Art and Design with a BFA in 1997. He resides in the city of Alameda with his husband of more than 28 years, Chris, and their son, Barbara. Ryan served with me at the Alameda County District Attorney's Office in the early days. He was part of our onboarding team, and he was played a pivotal role in electing me as the first non-appointed district attorney in almost 100 years. So Ryan, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered, and thank you for coming.
Thanks, it's about time.
It's a long introduction, but you have a lot to be proud of.
I do. I had a meeting today and someone said, you have 9,000 hats. And I was like, well, I don't wear them all the time.
Well, we are grateful that you wear them any of the time because your contributions to our community are invaluable.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I particularly and personally appreciate was your courage and willingness to stand up in going into the Alameda County District Attorney's office after we defeated the status quo candidate. And we literally marched into the office and began to address the problems and the issues that we found. So, can you tell my audience, just from your perspective, as you came in as our communications director, what was it like that first 90 days?
Well, you have your sister to thank. She's the one that convinced me. I was very hesitant because I felt like my power was in campaigns. And but she said that it was important for someone to be with you that you could trust during this time because that's the thing that we stepped into was an office that was leaking information that had a lot of distrust of us. And I think when it came to your cabinet level positions, I was the only non-attorney in the room, and I felt like a lot of times I was the one saying, "How are normal people going to understand what we're doing?" and trying to like decipher what we were saying, and how we were going to put it up to the public. All at the same time of creating a department that didn't exist. We didn't have a communications department. We didn't have uh, internal emails that really went to all staff all that much. They just transferred to emails right before we got there. There were pretty much not a lot of digital conversations. Um, and then on top of it, building the website, we were doing different types of PSA campaigns. I was working on tons of grant proposals because there would have to be a component where we have to write about like the messaging component. So there was a lot of moving parts, not to mention the physical work that comes with communications from our publications to the staff that put together the videos, overseeing them that are played in during a trial that show the triangulation of phones and but basically putting forward our case in video format.
Right. The presentation of evidence had to go forth, and you oversaw that, as well as all of the republication of all of the pamphlets and the public information that had to be redone
Yeah.
when we arrived.
And the most controversial part in the office was business cards because none of the prosecutors ever had business cards, and we're like, well, how do you talk to a victim's family and give them information about you with if you don't have a business card? And so creating business cards was actually probably the most difficult thing because people didn't even know what their titles were half the time.
Right, right. The office was clearly in a state of disorganization. And you're right, people didn't have titles. Some people weren't coming to work, as we discovered. And the office, as the IT director told me, the office was basically in the Stone Age when you looked at what the infrastructure was to support the people doing the work. And certainly that included the lawyers.
Yeah.
So, what do you feel like in that first 90 days was amongst your major accomplishments?
Oh, wow. I think getting the website up and going as soon as possible, I think it was really important for us to be communicating what our vision and mission was to the residents of the county as soon as possible. Obviously, this current new administration isn't doing that. I think the other big component for me was, as a person that worked in marketing and communications, government communications for many, many years, a brand was really key. And you and I really talked a lot about like what is the legacy that you wanted to leave in the time that you were there, and and then how do we convey that out? And so, for instance, like we got rid of the idea of divisions and created bureaus because divisions sound like we're dividing people and not unifying. Created bureaus and units and renamed. We did a whole, the restructuring of the office, creating new division bureaus and whatnot. I think that was really key in having that done right at the beginning so that we can just move on to the next part. And I also think that building out how we were going to communicate and work with the media. We had a game plan going into it. I would say that during the campaign, the media didn't want to talk to us. We were begging for stories, and in fact, they're like, "Oh, we can't give you a story because that's we're then we're prioritizing a candidate over someone that's in the office. And so once we got there, all they did was want to talk to us. And so create for us trying to figure out how that vision was. I mean, I had always only planned on being there for a short period of time. You knew that. It was a little shorter than what I had planned, but I do think that we set it up so that the next group that could take over had all those major components done, and they could focus on just the statements and the communication outward.
Yeah, I think having a communications department and being very clear about that was a huge step forward, because previously they had just used lawyers who aren't trained in communications or media and have other jobs to do in the office. And I appreciate that you mentioned how, critical we saw the website was, because one of the most astonishing things to me was that the new administration almost immediately took the website down. And I thought, what a disservice to the public to remove public information and access to information for the office. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is for the public to be able to have for a district attorney's office to have a website in 2025?
Well, I mean, one of the big things that we want to do, and that was part of our platform coming in, was being able to communicate out data. So, data on our prosecutions, on convictions, on how many people were going to diversion. We wanted to be able to put that data out. We found out really quickly that we didn't own that data, that it all went through the county or through the court, and we didn't have ownership over a lot of data. And that to us was all very surprising coming in. And that's really what we had hoped to do with the website, was be able to communicate, demographics, age, income, where are they coming from in the county, how long are they sitting, like you could, just look up cases really easily. But that didn't happen. So we pretty much focused on just making sure that all the main information was out there. If you look at the current website, you don't know anything. Like if you're a victim of human trafficking and you go to what we had set up for that, it doesn't exist. So who do they call? And I think that office is key. I mean, they made a big plea about how they're going to be there for victims, and our site was all about supporting family and links to those resources and names of people who they could contact, and the Family Justice Center having a huge component of it. Uh, None of that exists right now. It's literally just I was calling it a MySpace page for the new DA. It's just picture after picture of her, and there's a total of 5 press releases since February 18th. There's 5 press releases, which if we would have done that, I mean, we had 5 press releases in the first week.
Yeah, right. And the number of Public Record Act requests, and
Oh,
the number of media requests that we received, it just was overwhelming. In some ways, I've described it as drinking water out of a fire hose in that first 90 days. But we certainly did our best to try to create a structure for the public to be able to understand what was happening in the office. And as you know, before I left, we were right after I left in January, Chief Roberts was able to launch the public dashboard. But that took a year's worth of effort to put that together. And now it's gone. When they took down the website, they took down the public dashboard, which is unbelievable.
yeah. I mean, that, like I said, was part of the platform and what we really wanted to happen. And it took time because we had to figure out how to get the data and funnel it in. Another thing that we discovered was this pot of money that the office had received to build, um, uh, to create a portal for reporting child abuse. And that, child abuse reports were coming into the DA's office and just going into a filing cabinet for over 12 years. There was no actual searchable database in the office to even say, hey, was this child part of another child abuse case? Like, there was no way to do that. It was
Right.
just stacks and stacks of paper in a filing drawer down in the inspector's office that we discovered. And it was shocking. And so working to build that database, but also realizing that it was going to have 33 different inputs coming in from different police departments, from the county, from Child Protective Services. Um, yeah, it was the funny part was we were the new people and we were uncovering things that for everybody who'd been in the office for a while was new to them too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was almost like nobody was minding the store, the number of things that we found. I'll never forget asking, well, how many people did go through the diversion program, in 2022 and being told, we didn't count, we don't know.
Yeah.
And then them having to do a hand count for 2023, like manually figure this out. Okay. Yeah, the lack of systems and organization and appreciation of data was certainly shocking when we
You know,
got there.
I don't think that they built systems in order to communicate. I mean, they never had the intention of communicating out to the public. Like
Right,
it was never really set up for that.
right,
That is part of a reform that we had fought for was this
right,
transparency, right? So they never even thought that would be a necessary tool for them down the road. So, if, like for instance, we would get a public information request from a reporter, and they would ask, how many drug sales cases went to diversion? And we'd be like, well, we can only search based on penal code. And when it comes to penal code, there were like 12 different codes that could be used for it to go. So you have to do each one individually. And then sometimes they're charged with multiple penal codes. So you have to go through and take out your duplicates. And so it was just, it was like we needed in fact, I think we hired a data analyst right as I was leaving. That was someone we were bringing on so that we could do that component of it. So it was shocking. And my job is to make sure that information that needs to be out there that will be helpful and transparent can get out there. And, it was frustrating that I couldn't give it out sometimes, not because I didn't want to or we didn't want to,
right.
but it was just we couldn't physically have the time to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And it did take when I charged Tara Anderson by the end of 2023, I said, you have got to figure out a solution to this. And it took her all of 2024 to actually for them to create the public dashboard.
Yeah.
And while we were frustrated with not having data, at the same time, the media was focused on personnel issues, right? And things that we could not talk about, but people who were doing their exit interviews in the public sphere or in the
Yeah.
public square, so to speak. And how do you think, what was the impact of that?
I mean, when people ask why I left, I said, there's lots of layers to that, but the biggest layer for me was when I realized that I got into the elevator at the Renee Davidson building to go to lunch, and a bunch of coworkers, prosecutors, got into the elevator. They said hello, and they had started a conversation as they were coming in, then saw it was me, and they stopped their conversation. And then someone turned to me and said, "Where are you going for lunch?" And I told them where I was going for lunch, and they said, "Oh, do you want to join us?" And I got really nervous because I don't know them. One of those people, two of those people, all of those people might be someone who's leaking the information that we were having leaks of all kinds of conversations. Like someone would walk by an office and be like, "I heard so and so say this on the phone," and it's like you don't even know who we were talking to. Um, and so that to me was jarring. I'd never worked in a place where I couldn't trust people. And it really, I, you have to be able to have trust in your coworkers and your job. And so to me, that was the hardest part. And then I was doing little things to be able to figure out who the leaker was, leakers. And, we figured out who a few of them were over time. Um, but it was frustrating because people would get information before I could even craft a press release. Like we literally decided on something. I'm going to my office. I'm writing a press release that we're going to put out, and a reporter has the information already. Um, and sometimes the part that really upset me was that they were doing things that they would have never done to another administration, and they were doing it to the harm of a case. When they came out in the Mish case in the first month with how with knowing what we were going to be doing on the charges of that case before we had a chance to tell the victim's family and the court. We've never even filed anything yet. The fact that the media had that information before we could do what we were supposed to be doing as an office with integrity and reporting it out as if like they should be. And that was week two. I was just like, wow, there's no all gloves are off. Like they
Yeah.
really don't
Yeah.
care if they harm a case.
Yeah. That was the scary part, was that none of the folks that chose to leak information had any integrity about how we were managing the case or concern for the victims or how it would hurt the case. I saw people giving statements on television, and I'm thinking, you are undermining our ability to prosecute this case. You're endangering our ability to get a conviction, and you should not do that. If you are an ethical lawyer and you call yourself a prosecutor for how many decades, why are you doing this? Because politics, that's what it was. It was politics trumped public safety, and
The
there
other
was no holds barred.
Yeah, the other thing that was really surprising during that time for me too, that I have not seen happen in the previous administration or the current, which is community leaders like going to the victims and telling them things that this is what's happening in the case. We had that on Jasper Wu, we had that on me, like all these different cases, they were going to the victims' families, Longwood, all those, and saying, this is what that office is going to do without us even having made any movement on anything. They were just
Right,
figuring out this is what we might do, telling the victims, and then the victims going and getting on media saying, I didn't, like, they're doing this. And it's like, we never even said that.
right,
And
right.
and then the hard part for me was I can't say no, we didn't say that. I actually remember something that you told me that really stuck with me, and it showed the rock and the hard place that we were in. And it was and I'm probably going to be really blunt about it. One of the mothers in the case went on the news and lied, said that we never informed her of what was going on, and so I asked people who were in the room just because I want to make sure. Like, I might be told by someone, oh no, we did say it, but I checked my sources and they said no, they knew. And I said to you, I said, I want to tell the media that she's lying, that she was given that information. And you said, no, they're victims. I don't want to victimize them more.
Right, right,
And I was like, oh, I just knew that this was going to be something used against us and a loophole where we have integrity not to cause more harm to them as victims by calling them liars, even if they were. But I understood what you said at that moment, because there was an integrity component that we had to adhere to. And it
right.
stuck with me ever since.
Yeah, we were not going to exploit or weaponize victims. You just couldn't do that. I wouldn't have done that if I wasn't the chief prosecutor in the office, but I knew that we could not do that. And yet it was clear that there were people who were willing to exploit people's grief, and they weaponized victims and made the public think. And yes, some of the victims were absolutely lying, and you and I knew it. And the chief of the victim witness advocates division knew it because we had the records. We could look and see how many times they had been called, who they were talking to, what was actually discussed with them. And yet you had people who had, were victims of a crime that were willing to go on television and lie, or were willing to give a statement to the media. And it was absolutely not true, but we could not exploit them or, demean them further, even though they had pretty much transferred themselves from the realm of being a survivor into a political activist.
Yeah. I think the other component to that too was, the Marcy's Law making it that, victims know what's happening and they're informed through the whole process of a trial and sentencing and resentencing. And, when you go into these documents and you have, like, on some of the cases that we were reopening, those 10 big cases. I think that to me, I think the strategy of how we opened those and released it and notified the police and the victims, like that coordinated effort in that first month when we started that unit. I think that's also a really proud moment for me because it really required a delicate hand. And what came about for me in that was that, in our system, the sister of, let's say, of someone who passed away is the person that we contact to tell these things. And it's not the mother, it's not the uncle, it's not the cousin, it's the sister that we're telling because that's who's in the system. We call the sister, we inform the sister. Well, sister doesn't tell her family. She doesn't talk to her family anymore. Whatever the case might be, we have a cousin come out of the work saying, "I didn't know," and then the media runs with it, and it's like, like we're breaking the law by not telling the families, and it's like that's not how this works.
Right, exactly. There are many people, and that no one took the time to understand how the system was organized. Right. And this is the information that we have that was there before we got there. And yet the media was able to find somebody else who may or may not have been in our system, as you say, most of the time was not. That's not the contact person.
Yeah.
And so they put that person on television and give that person, let that person speak. And it was all very politicized, and that was the really challenging part of trying to do justice, where people just actually wanted to create a political moment.
Yeah, I think that was orchestrated before you even were sworn in. I mean, like I said, the hashtag recall Pamela appeared, the day that they called it for you in November.
Yeah.
And I tracked all of it. I had a whole list of here's people and what they're saying list. And I told you early on who I was like, these people are going to be leading the recall. They're saying so much stuff and connecting so many weird dots that don't exist. And like that first petition that came out said that we were putting TVs in Santa Rita jail. And I'm
Right.
like, we have no control over Santa Rita jail. But the media was going with it and asking those questions. And I'm like, that doesn't exist.
Right, right. Remember, I don't know if you remember the inquiry we got about the Earl Warren desk, that somehow I had I had what did they say, that I had salvaged the Earl Warren desk? It was like, oh my God, who is saying these things? And
Well,
yet
even
they're
even the rumor of when you left office that you took the Earl Warren desk with you.
right. Yeah, exactly. They said I stole the furniture out of the office. Yeah, right. Okay. In the dead of night, I pulled up with a truck. I obviously had a crew to help me move 400 pounds of furniture. And
Yeah,
where did I put it? Right? Like, really?
yeah.
The most ridiculous things went into, and that's one of the things when we talked about last week, the misinformation that goes into the world, and a lie that goes around the world before the truth puts its boots on. And that became factual for many people. And it's unfortunate because it really causes a lack of trust in the criminal justice system, certainly the media. But our job and our goal was to increase public trust, and we were fought on that at every turn. And certainly communications was a huge part of that. So what
Yeah,
have you seen? Go ahead.
I was gonna say there were the report. It's just a weird reaction too, where it's like I saw a fever pitch with reporters that we didn't see before and we're not seeing now.
Well, that's what I was
It's
going to
like,
ask you. You've been watching the first 90 days of the new administration.
yeah.
How does that compare to what we experienced?
Well, minor things like, for instance, like there's, the policy of how cameras and media come into the courthouse is determined by the chief of the court, not us. And so if they don't allow cameras of any sort in the hallways or anything, every time we would have to do a press conference there, we would have to get permission to do the press conference, which is one of the big reasons why we did move the press conferences to over by the Coliseum office because we didn't really have a lot of control. We couldn't, and there wasn't a lot of space. That was the other thing. It's a very, small space. But we didn't have a lot of control over who could come in and what kind of cameras. And but reporters didn't care. I mean, we constantly were telling people no photographs, no photographs, no photographs, and there's video and pictures of you, them chasing you down a hallway, and it's like I have never seen them do that to anybody else, and there wasn't anything controversial happening. We we were coming in and doing exactly what we said we were going to do, and what the voters voted you in to do. So, I think the difference from our first 90 days to now is, well, the biggest difference is that when the DA's office does something, it's just the DA's office. It's not Pamela Price's DA's office or Ursula's DA's office. It's just the county DA's office again, just, you know, no name added to it.
It's
Uh,
not the embattled district attorney Pamela Price.
or the progressive office or whatever, they like all kinds of different things. Um, and then the other is that I look at some of the reporting where there's a plea deal. Like I was looking up some of them, and so for instance, in Alameda, there was a shooting at one of our convenience stores. The owner of the convenience store shot someone who was stealing cigarettes and killed them point blank in the head. And that case took a while to get through the system. The system takes a while. And getting witnesses and all those things pulled together and getting on the court log in the system, it was fascinating how slow justice was in general. But two, it got pled to the guy's going to serve like 6 years, and he's already been sitting in Santa Rita for a good portion of that, and will probably just walk away for killing someone. And it seems like the media was like, oh, it's justified because the kid was stealing cigarettes. And it's like, how is someone dying over cigarettes or any type of crime, someone dying during, a carjacking or just how I understand that they're the person creating a criminal act, but it's not a death sentence. And it's just surprising that people get away with it in a plea deal. But if we would have done that plea deal,
Yeah.
we would have been like, oh, you're letting a murderer walk away. But when it got a spin of, oh, that person took out a criminal. And it was just so odd how you became this picture for the media of the saint to criminals.
Right.
And that you were, or the reference of the auntie, the racist, I mean, as soon as that was stated, I was just like, I just, it is so East Bay, where it is that the microaggressions that, I mean, here's the thing. I worked on your campaign. I saw the emails that came in, and they weren't microaggressions. They were blatantly racist. I mean,
Right.
I, I was, and people use their real names. I was just like, I know where you work.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but the microaggressions from the media were bone chilling. And at certain points, I think that was also, I had a hard time, and this, with creating a safe space to be able to communicate out when reporters are doing blatantly racist things physically, or going after staff in very racist ways. How do I create a safe press conference room?
Right.
Those people are there. And I know that you and I was like, there's also freedom of the press. Is there, where's the dichotomy of freedom of the press and freedom from racism, right? And you said to me at one point, you're like, I don't really want to go in that room if those racist individuals are there and going to
Yeah.
spew their racism. And I didn't know how to create an environment that was free of freedom of press and free of racism.
Right.
And
Yeah. No,
and it was difficult.
yeah.
Um,
The racism was so blatant and obvious, and just I did not want to be in a room with the KKK. That's what I told you. I can't
yeah,
be in a room with the KKK. That's not what I'm here for.
yeah.
Um,
And it's one
so
of those things that I see, what's funny is that they're not focused on the DA. I haven't seen those same racist aggressions towards the new black DA, but I've seen them shift to the new mayor of Oakland, and she's called the queen, or she's called the auntie as well. And it's very interesting because they just focus on people who are going to do reform and change and not keep the status quo. And anyone who is going to keep the status quo, oh, they're fine. No matter who they are, they're fine.
Right, exactly. Well, that there was an amazing editorial piece that I shared with my audience by David Greenwald of the Davis Vanguard, and he asked the question, why is there a double standard in terms of prosecutions? And he certainly laid out all of the transgressions that have been documented of the traditional tough on crime prosecutors. And, we had obviously lots of documentation of the transgressions of the prior administration under Nancy O'Malley, and some things that we found that were just shocking. And we had to undo contracts and go back and look at things. I mean, the public was aware she tried to basically take $20 million out of the county's coffers before we got there on some false pretense that we were going to do something when we got there. And we were called criminal. I mean, it was just over the top ridiculousness. But it was acceptable because she's a traditional tough on crime prosecutor, a president of CDAA. And as David pointed out, many of these folks that we see are been found to have engaged in racist practices, sexist practices, and unethical behavior. They're tough on crime prosecutors, but there seems to be a double standard. How do you explain the difference and the obvious disparity between the media coverage of tough on crime prosecutors and progressive prosecutors?
I mean, like I said earlier, I don't think that the system and the media is a system when it comes to criminal justice has ever really been had a pathway for information. They take police union press releases, DA press releases, and treat them like the gold standard, as if everything in there is completely what is the way that it's laid out. And when you're going in and upheaving what their status quo, even and how they get their information, they respond in the way of they don't want change as well.
Yeah, yeah,
I think the
that's
difference is finding reporters, and that was key for us. Finding reporters, I want a reporter to be neutral. I don't want them to be on my side when they're telling a story. I want facts put out there, and I want it to be a neutral reporting. And, sometimes we weren't doing it right. No one's going to get perfect on things, and I'm fine with that being out there for the public to know. But I want you to be neutral when you do it and factual. And that really wasn't happening a lot of time. There were a few reporters. Lisa Fernandez, for me, was my go-to for someone who was going to report the truth and not give it a little like the other reporters gave a little microaggression spin of like, calling you the progressive DA versus you're the DA. Whether you're progressive or not, you're the DA. And why do you have to label it? And, if it wasn't for her, that, all of that sex abuse happening at the Dublin prison would still be happening. And she broke that case and it changed the system. And that's what reporters should be doing is finding those little nuggets of truth and where there's harm happening and fix that with reporting those facts. And in fact, all they really wanted to do was dethrone you.
yeah. My name was clickbait, and you're absolutely right. Every time my name was stated, there was some little dig in there, some way to denigrate who I was. And that became, the theme of the reporting for the entire time we were there, which was not fair, and it was unfortunate. And there were times that other people, I recall when for instance, the Livermore police chief had a press conference and reported on something, and no one realized he was a Republican running for office, and nobody pointed that out. The man was literally running for office as a Republican candidate in a county, not Alameda County, and yet he was able to manipulate the media really for his own interest. It didn't have anything to do with the case or what we were doing. And so people got manipulated like that. And it was really hard to watch, but you couldn't communicate with them in that way. They just went
Well,
with whatever the police said. That must be
yeah.
the way.
The interesting part too is, they would ask, we get tons of inquiries, obviously, from reporters, and we would do our best to try to answer them. Like I said, data was an issue sometimes, or they want it. So, like, for instance, the demand, like, I didn't get to the office till 8:30. And for me, that's still pretty early. There'd be an email sent at 7 a.m. saying, I need a response by 8:45. And it's like, well, I come in, I draft a response literally within 10 minutes of being there. I send it to you. You're like, okay, who's the reporter? What's it for? What's this on? We go over it all. You're like, yep, that's good. I send it to them. They're like, oh, too late. I already posted my story and it shows no comment from you.
Right, right. Or the story that I loved where somebody said, we we went to the victim and it was like 7 o'clock. They raced to the victim and we called the DA's office, but it was after 5 o'clock. I'm like, yeah, people do go home who work for the county at 5 o'clock. But the expectation was that we were going to be available 24/7 and we were going to respond in 10 minutes, literally giving
Yeah.
you such a small window of response. And
Right.
that obvious to me, that was intentional.
Yeah. Or you would give them the information and they didn't like it because it wasn't juicy. Like
Right.
they thought there was going to be something really juicy in it, and you give them the information and then they don't even report on it. Like it was something they were all going down, and it's because we didn't have anything controversial in it. It didn't go anywhere. I now a very interesting thing that I'm seeing because I still pitch stories to the media for as a volunteer for different causes locally, and I was pitching this one story recently, and a difference that I saw was that there were some good facts, and this was like a really good story. The editors really were the people that were putting the kibosh on things. And I was really surprised because normally the reporters have a pretty good grasp of what's going to go through. They understand their editors and what their editors want. But the reporter would work out the whole story, and then they'd be like, "Oh yeah, they pulled it at the last minute. It's not going to happen." And in one case that I was doing, one thing that I was pitching, one outlet did run with it, and then that other outlet came back and said, "We need a different angle than what you gave us because they ran with that angle, and now we need different." I was like, "There's only one angle. This is just these are the facts."
Exactly. They want you to make up some facts to
Right.
help their ratings and clicks. That's what
Yeah.
it's about. That's what's driving it.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of, I mean, within that office, I think what was interesting previous to us was that there was a lot of exclusives given. There was a lot of reliance on certain people in the office being the person quoted, um, from, Butch Ford to Terry to, it was all these people that weren't Nancy on a lot of things. And the reporters would just go to them directly at certain points. We had reporters from San Francisco coming directly to our office and asking individual attorneys questions. And it's like, no, there's a protocol you go. Now, granted, there was never a office of communication before, so that was a learning mechanism for them. And we had our attorneys just saying things to the media on stuff that could harm a case in a sense. And so, we reminded people, and this was the part that I thought was really funny, in that, you know, Pamela is clamping down on people on their free speech in the office because they had signed a pledge, the same pledge that Nancy's office has, and I'm sure that Ursula's office has, that said that you're not going to do anything to harm a case, you're not going to leak information, that you're going to things should go through the information officer, and so they sign that pledge every year, and
Right.
we had
There was a policy, but people just completely ignored it and said, no, we're gonna violate the policy and we don't care anymore. So
yeah.
it was open communication warfare with people in the office, which was really, really hurtful to the cause of justice and us trying to serve the public.
Yeah, I mean, I also know too, like for me, I was new to being an elected official and new to this kind of government agency that had the
Mhm.
union component too. Like that was all very new to me. When I worked for the Department of Health and Human Services as a contractor, we didn't have to worry about office and union and staff and all that kind of stuff. But now that I'm on the board of directors for the school district, we have union partners that we work with. And I've said from the dais many times, I was like, it's frustrating because I know information that I'm not able to share because of my position in Brown Act and confidentiality and human resources issues. But the union can go out and say whatever they want. They can say things that not even really necessarily true or the fact at that moment or tell a little bit of a tale. We would have that happen also with the prosecutors union, and it's
Absolutely.
so frustrating because it's like we don't talk about these matters and we've never talked about them, but now you have someone talking about them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. They'd run to the primary representative of the prosecutors union, who was someone that was adamantly opposed to our administration before we got there and while we were there. But they would run and profile him and feature his comments about things that they knew we couldn't talk about.
Yeah. I remember when I met him, it was during your swearing in ceremony at Renee Davison Courthouse. And it's when Judge Brenda was swearing you in, which she's done a whole, 180 on who she is, just crazy town on that. But I remember that individual from the prosecutors union, there was not enough room, and so I wanted the prosecutors to be in the room for it, and I was standing out in the hallway, and the union head was like, "No, I don't want to be in that room for this." And he
Mhm.
said that right to my face, and I was like, I said, "You just said that to me." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Who are you?" And then once he found out who I was, he never said anything to me again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he had a lot to say to the media.
But not through me.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right, Ryan, this has been delightful. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your insights and for your service to our community, both in the DA's office and in the Alameda Unified School District as, a wonderful elected official, as a parent, as a father. I've watched you grow in that role and doing great things. I know it's things are changing.
You know, I
And
don't know what I'm going
so
to do with myself. He's a rising senior, so we have one more year, and I'm going to have so much extra time on my hands when he's in college that I might be a little lethal.
yeah, right, exactly. All right, on that note, thank you for coming to Pamela Price Unfiltered and being unfiltered, my friend. Take care.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Pamela Price Unfiltered. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and to my Substack to read the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered.